I'd like to affirm that we will stand by our struggle until we get our justice. We stand by our struggle. Even though administration is conspiring against us, even though administration is maligning the dead, even though administration is criminalizing the protesters, even though administration through their chamchas are trying to divide the students, we will stand by the struggle for the justice. In this struggle, many of our activist friends and friends from outside have expressed their solidarity in terms of fact-finding committees or people who have visited our Dharna camp. Now, this week's protest comes to an end with this open meeting on Saturday in the weekend. And now I request our chief guests and speakers of this evening. First, I request Bhoomaiah garu, Telangana Praja Front President, to come and occupy the chair. I request Mohammed Lateef Khan Saab, Secretary, Civil Liberties Monitoring Committee, to come and occupy the chair. I request V. Raghunath, APCLC, to occupy the chair. I request Samia Vasa, research scholar of EFLU, to come and occupy the chair. I request Reju also to come and occupy the chair. Dear friends, as we all know, we could successfully stall the administration. We could successfully entire functioning of administration for the past 1 week. In order to demotivate the protesting students, in order to threaten the students, the administration came up with a maligning campaign of the protesters as well as a campaign of declaring a zero semester. Instead of the maligning campaign, instead of the threatenings that we have received, the student community has stood together. Since we have gathered here, this shows our strength. This shows our strength to carry the movement forward. This shows our strength to carry the struggle for the justice Mudasir to carry forward. This shows our strength that we don't want any Mudasirs on the campus. We don't want to see any compelled suicides. We don't want to see any discrimination. We don't want to see any harassment, either in the name of gender, caste, region or religion. This shows our strength to continue the protest for justice. As you all know, Sri Ramulu, who has been in ICU, has been discharged now and he is on the way. Our respected registrar, he himself has gone to pick him up in his own car. He is on the way. He will be coming straight away to this protest meeting. And first, now I request Samia Vasa to speak.
Good evening, everyone. We stand in a university campus today on which a PhD student hanged himself 8 days ago. Since then, a small group of students has persistently protested the role of the university administration in his suicide. These protesting students, as Satish has just said, have been threatened with police action. They have been threatened with serious academic repercussions. Like declaring this semester zero semester. And these students have also been stereotyped as violent, disruptive, unthinking, unreasonable, emotionally charged young people who have no respect for either education or normalcy on this campus. As a student who has been deeply disturbed by Mudasir's suicide, I want to think, along with all the students and faculty members, non-teaching staff, contract workers, what is normalcy on this EFLU campus? Is there any political recognition of the voices of students on this campus? Is there any accountability in the actions of people who are in positions of power? This is a university that is deeply invested into hierarchies of caste, gender and class. This is a university that systematically grades its members into categories of the most important to the least important. Regularly, these gradations are played out in the ways in which certain students are less important than other students and certain faculty members are more important than other faculty members. If this is what is EFLU's normalcy, shouldn't our political task be to challenge these hierarchies and the injustices they create? Why have large sections of this campus refused to engage with the multiple issues of cultural homophobia, state violence and administrative callousness in this suicide case? Why are the members of this campus so complacent and hand in glove with the repressive ideologies of the university administration? What were the circumstances that led Mudasir to kill himself? Mudasir Kamaran had a complaint filed against him by one of his close friends 3 months ago. The complaint described the ways in which the friend was being harassed by Mudasir, beaten up, threatened and stalked. The university administration refused to understand the complexities of this problem. All that they did was to give Mudasir's friend a separate room and membership in another mess. Memos and show cause notices were served to Mudasir instead of addressing the issues at stake. Even while this case was being discussed by the authorities, it was being called a homosexual issue. The way in which this term was used signified a link between violence, deviance and homosexuality. Why was an intelligent, conscientious student resorting to physical violence? What was it that made a close friendship a site for criminalization? The possibility of homosexual desire and the existence of a mental health issue did not once deter the administration from taking disciplinary action against a Kashmiri student. In fact, these factors were instrumental in the ways in which Mudasir was dealt with and discriminated against. It has been reported by multiple eyewitnesses that the proctor had called Mudasir a mentally disordered rascal. Students have protested against such name calling, especially because Mudasir himself was deeply affected by it. He kept sobbing after his arrest and asking his friends if he was really insane. We have to ask the proctor and we have to ask ourselves, what is it to be sane on this Indian university campus? What is it to be sane in the structures of patriarchy, compulsory heterosexuality and violent nationalisms, all of which affected Mudasir, his friend, and that affects all of us? Disgust at the evidence of homosexual desire and a deliberate dismissal of mental health issues were crystal clear in the ways in which the proctor has dealt with this issue. In spite of repeated requests of arranging counseling services for Mudasir, all that the proctor could make of this complex situation was that law and order of this campus is being disrupted. For the proctor, being homosexual was criminal activity. For the proctor, mental health issues could be solved only by the police. This is the same administration that had refused to help a woman student file a police complaint when a faculty member had molested her. Clearly, our administration thinks that upper caste heterosexual men have the right to be sexually violent towards other women. Clearly, the violence that is compulsory heterosexuality is not a concern for our administration. Clearly, our administration thinks that outside of heterosexuality, there is only violence. This same administration refuses to suspend a senior faculty member who has destroyed the lives, hopes and dreams of many SC/ST students in this campus through her deadly casteism. Clearly, our administration thinks that violence is only the prerogative of casteist faculty members. They don't need to be handed over to the police. They don't need to be counseled. And they don't need to be humiliated. Before Mudasir died, the administration had whispered the word homosexuality. After his death, the administration has been making open claims that it was because of Mudasir's homosexuality that he was so mentally disturbed and violent. Does homosexuality make people more prone to hanging themselves? Does that mean that the university can't do anything about it and can only take responsibility if the person hanging himself or herself is heterosexual? The administration has tried so hard to erase Mudasir's Kashmiri Muslim identity while dealing with him and even after his death. What did it mean to him to be handed over to the police? Why are there no support mechanisms in this university for students who come from contexts of extreme military abuse and violence? If the administration has been so invested in proving that Mudasir was gay and therefore irredeemable, a large section of the students has been very insistent that Mudasir expressed no signs of being gay. A lot of students have been saying that there was no evidence of his gayness and that this is a maligning campaign that has been launched by the administration to insult him. It's being called homosexual an insult. One student went so far as to call this problem an instance of brotherly love. A campus that discusses homosexuality only in connection to violence is a space that does not and cannot allow a healthy identification of gayness or non-heterosexual practices of love and friendship. What are the resources for LGBT people on this campus? Zero. The university community represses, censors and makes it impossible for anyone to express homosexual desire. And then we are told that Mudasir cannot be gay because homosexuality was not expressed. These students have only foregrounded Mudasir's Kashmiri identity. What does it say about us as students in a central university campus that in 2013 we do not offer whatever support we can to students who may have a sexual orientation different from our own, just as they have a region different from our own, or just as they have a politics different from our own? What do we make of these twin erasures? Why do our ideologies force us to read this case either as a case of pure homosexual criminality or pure discrimination based on a Kashmiri identity? We have to understand that there is no homosexual angle here without the Kashmiri identity, and no Kashmiri identity here without the self-destroying homophobia. An angle means that you abstract it from the picture and the picture remains the same. Institutionalized and culturally pervasive homophobia and violent nationalisms are the structuring forces of this case, of this frame, and we should recognize them as such. I, as a lot of students on this campus, think that the administration and especially the proctor has had a crucial role to play in Mudasir's suicide. At the same time, I stand implicated in my capacity as a student and as a member of this community for not having been able to counter our collective homophobia. What are the politics of our responses to Mudasir's life and to his death? And here, we must take complete responsibility over what we must know and of what we can know of ourselves. And our demands to the administration should also reflect this responsibility as a student community. So if the administration is systematically dispensing homophobia through its attribution of homosexuality to Mudasir, we don't need to reject homosexuality as the problem. We need to recast the definitions of homosexuality. As a student community, we have to ensure that the identities of other LGBT students of this campus are not erased, are not questioned, are not threatened. We have to ensure that students who wish to identify themselves as non-heterosexual do not encounter a hostile environment every time they attempt to express their desires. Unless we make this structural link between violence and homophobia, we will continue to perpetuate the same anxieties that led Mudasir to kill himself. Weeks before Mudasir committed suicide, a friend and I were discussing what we can do about this case. She told me that she thinks that a lot of people on this campus are not homophobic, they are just not used to homosexuals. We must not accept this explanation. We must ask why homosexuality is not visible. We must ask why homosexuality is recognized only through acts of violence. We must ask why we are refusing to engage with Mudasir's acts of violence as also the possible effects of non-acceptance, indeed the impossibility of acceptance, humiliation and consistent erasures. And finally, we must undertake the massively difficult task of working on our own anxieties, on our own selves, on our own campaigns, on our own protests. I appeal to all the members of the university and the people who have come here from outside the university to help us, to join us in reworking our definitions of violence. we have to acknowledge the multiple ways in which each of us is violent to the other, even as we rightfully and we must critique the administration's violence on students in its actions and in its languages of power.